Hi there, and welcome back to the Few Show. Today I'm joined by Sean De Clercq. He's the CEO of Kickfurther, the world's first online inventory funding platform. Throughout his entrepreneurial career, his driving goal has always been to create a solution to one of the most difficult problems that growing businesses face, overcoming the funding of the production of their inventory. Sean created Kickfurther to fund inventory for direct-to-consumer and major store brands such as Target, Amazon, Aldi, and more. Thanks for joining us in the show.
Thanks for having me, David. It's my pleasure to be here.
So you have been at your company for a good number of years, is that right?
Yeah, we've been doing this since August 2014, so coming up on 7 years now.
How did, I guess, your life as the CEO of the company change over those years?
Well, in the beginning, it was me and my co-founder. So, it's like in the early stages, you're doing everything and more, right? And, in the first year, it's very fun because it's like, it is very high stakes. I won't say it's low stakes, but it's like everything's new and everything's possible, right? It's just this world of possibilities. And it's like, oh, I want to try this. And it's like, great, you can try that. Did it work? I don't know. Like, let's figure it out later. And it's just, it's very interesting in the first year. It's just full of creative energy, right? Like, and then as the business develops, and as you start to encounter like different types of investors, right, and your early stakeholders that just bought into the vision are like, all right, but now where's the vision going, right? So it's like get to years 2, year 3 in, and people start looking for real results, right? And it's like, all right, how does this business make money? What's the real scale proposition? And I think my experience is that, it's really has been a change and a different job almost every single year that I do it, where I'm solving different problems, solving new problems, always learning, and, hopefully becoming a little bit more mature along the way.
Is the current offering the one where you help companies with their funding the same additional idea from, I guess, 2014, or did you pivot multiple times over?
We we had one pivot at the very, very beginning. So we got into the business accelerator under this idea of distributed commerce. So the big idea was, all right, when you think about the way commerce works, it's like the people that own distribution own like a lot of the value, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, and if you can get people to buy stuff that you recommend, right, you can start to displace organizations like think Target or Walmart, right? Like,
Right.
why are they so valuable? They own distribution. And we see today with the advent of e-commerce and everything else that there's really this opportunity for people to leverage their power as influencers and distributors potentially,
Hmm.
right? Like, who hasn't had the experience of like, hey, I love this product. Now I'm going to go advocate for it for a few of my friends, and they're all going to buy it and they're all going to love it, right? And it was like, everybody does that. Wouldn't it be cool if we could create a platform where people could actually earn the value,
Hmm.
and keep a piece of the revenue for the work that they're doing for those brands, and even potentially turn that into a full-time job, right? Like really distributed commerce, right? Instead of having one target, we have hundreds of little product people, you know what I mean? All earning a little slice. And I was like, that was kind of a big idea. And then when we got down to it, we got to the accelerator, and one of the first pivots we made was to say, look, at the end of the day, people don't want to sell stuff, right? Like multi-level marketing
Yeah.
is like just gave the entire industry affiliate selling a terrible name, right? And nobody wants to be the guy that's like, hey, come to my store and buy some stuff, right? Like it just has like this like stink to it, right? I don't know how to put it other than that like if you're not selling your own branded products, people don't feel good about it. And so that was a
Right.
big hurdle for us to try and cross. And we realized that actually people wanted to support entrepreneurs and people wanted to participate and learn more about the retail industry. And they were looking for earning opportunities, but they weren't really comfortable with selling or promoting products to their own networks, right?
I see.
And so we started to think, hey, well, we know that there are entrepreneurs, right? Businesses that have lots of customers and they have tons of distribution, and actually what they need is people to fund their inventory and to provide a really important middle piece of that supply chain management of funding of the inventory. So our first pivot was to take this huge idea, which is to say we're going to take the entire e-commerce value chain, right, and we're going to make it a distributed value chain where
Hmm.
anybody can participate in any piece of it and earn some money. And we said, all right, we're going to focus on the very middle part of that, which is the funding of the inventory, right? And we're going to see if we can make this open and available to everyone and whether we can democratize that. And so that was the big pivot of the business. It happened within 2 months of getting to the accelerator program, within weeks, actually. And since then, it's been really focusing on that middle segment. And I would say we have made improvements and changes to how we solve that problem, but we have not pivoted away from that core competency since that change in 2014.
So how long into the business was your joining of this accelerator program?
The very first thing. So prior to getting into the accelerator, we hadn't incorporated. All I had was a business model, no code, no customers, no product. So it was literally, I applied to the accelerator with a business model, and then we built it from the accelerator.
We being?
We, in the very early stages, was myself, my sister, who helped me start the company, and one co-founder.
And how did you choose to, I guess, split up responsibilities in the early days?
How we could, the best we could, right? Like, I think that's the answer for a lot of these things. We kind of said, look, where are our core competencies, right? Someone's got to raise money. What do we need to do, right? Like, what are the things that need to happen, and who can do it, right? Who do we think is going to be best suited to do it? And you do the best you can with the resources and the people you have, right? And like I said, a lot of us learn a lot. It's like, oh, nobody knows how to do that. Okay, your job to go learn it and do it, right? And like a lot of it was that in the early days.
It's cool that you're able to get along with your sister in a professional work relationship. I imagine a lot of.
I didn't say that.
Okay, all right.
No,
let me take that back. Let me change that. I am surprised that you would get into business with family members, because I think one of the common things I hear is like, oh, never get into business with family members.
Yeah, that's wise. Very wise advice. So this is what I would say. It's like you do what you can with what you can, right? And in the early stages, I didn't have a lot of other people. Certainly nobody was writing checks off of my idea, right? But my awesome older sister believed in it, and she was willing to put in a lot of work and help me be a great sounding board and help me check all this stuff. And we got into the accelerator. And, midway through the accelerator program, we realized, and this wasn't the easiest conversation, but it was like, look, our personal relationship is getting in the way of the business, right? And it's like, you make that realization and you're like, all right, well, should we just keep trying to fight this fight over and over again? Or should we just kind of figure out a way that we can, both be successful and happy? And so, midway through the accelerator, we parted ways. She's still a stakeholder in Kickfurther. She introduced us to our first investors. So, still an important piece and a very important piece of our history. But no, we did not have a very successful working relationship.
How did you, who was the one who brought up the discussion with the other two, I guess, bring it and put it in the open air?
Oh, it was obvious to everyone. So our other co-founder, Andrew, was like, "What the hell are you guys doing? Like, if you guys don't talk it out, I'm out." You know what I mean? It was just not productive, and we could see that there was just no way we were going to get to the point of being a hyper-scale technology company, right? If we were fighting about stupid sibling stuff, that's just not the place for it.
So you're connected to your sister biologically. How are you connected to your other co-founder?
Through Reddit. That was that was the original connection. Yeah.
Wait, what? Yeah, that's a story. You have to share that story.
Yeah. So we got at the very early stages, I applied to the accelerator. You're probably familiar. Most accelerators don't want solopreneurs, right? So they're like, all right, who's your technical co-founder? You're building a website, so you have a technical co-founder. And I was like, yeah, of course. He'll be on the next call, right? And then I got off that call and I went to Reddit and I went to r web dev and I was like, who wants to be a co-founder? Who wants to co-found a company with me, right? And I pretty much put up my business plan in a Reddit blog post. I could go back and find it, right? But one guy or maybe 3 people responded, right? Mostly haha, no way. But one guy expressed interest and we had a further conversation. And yeah, he was like, yeah, this seems like it could go somewhere. And then I told him that I was already in the accelerator. So I was like, I already have the first investors. And he was like, all right, seems legit enough. And yeah, well, the first time I ever met my other co-founder was when we moved into an apartment together in Boulder, Colorado. He moves from Texas. I moved from New Jersey.
Gotcha. Okay. And you're cool with going from Reddit friendship to living in the same house.
It wasn't even Reddit friendship. It was literally like a stranger on Reddit that
Okay,
I was
gotcha.
like, we're gonna start a business together now. And there was probably like a total of 5 to 8 phone calls between like meeting on Reddit and then moving into an apartment together. And yeah, that was a huge risk. But yeah, you don't start business if you're too
Right,
risk
right.
averse, right? So
So what'd you talk about in those phone calls to make sure that you were like a good mutual fit for each other?
um I think it was mostly like a lot of it was along the lines of like, hey, is this going to be real, right? Like he had a full-time job, so he was going to quit his
Mhm.
job. And so a lot of it was like, how real is this? Who are you? Why should I have any confidence that you're going to be able to take this where you say you're going to be able to take it, right? Like, is there any opportunity that this could be $1 billion company? Because I don't want to quit my job for like a $5 million company, right? Like, that's not worth it for me. And so, yeah, there was a lot of conversations about like, what's the market size? It was almost like pitching an investor, right? Which really is what it was,
Mhm.
because I'm asking him to invest his life, right, in my business. And so, yeah, it was very much like pitching an investor in those early days.
And it's been 7 years since that time, right?
Yeah, 7
And
years now.
things have went like smoothly ever since.
No,
Okay.
that's not. I don't think any startup goes smoothly for 7 years. Andrew and I worked very well together. We parted ways about 18 months
Okay.
into the relationship there. So it was about a year and a half in, and then we just found that there was a better opportunities for us to continue our professional relationship in other directions.
Gotcha. And how did you, or what did you learn? What were some of the major takeaways from that experience?
Definitely get vesting. So every single person, if you're doing a startup, should put your equity on a vesting schedule. It would have been extremely painful, could have quite easily killed the business if I wasn't able to get back a portion of the equity that he had in the early days. It's not
Mhm.
like the nicest thing to say, but there's a
Right, right.
reason that all investors and everybody. So it's like from pure like good housekeeping perspective, right? All equity should vest from the very beginning, including mine, right? So I was on the same schedule as he was. Everybody was on the same schedule. That's fair. Um, so that was super important. What you said earlier, right? Like bring up those tough conversations earlier, right? Don't wait until it
Right.
festers and it becomes an unsolvable problem. Every day that goes by, people get more and more entrenched, right? And they become more comfortable. They have higher expectations. So it's like getting ahead of that, being proactive to address those issues early will pay dividends in the long run. And I also think there's a very important lesson where, people look at this and they're like, oh, that's like sad. And I'm like, it's not sad, right? Like he did really well. I
Yeah.
did really well. Kickfurther's doing really well. We've helped hundreds of entrepreneurs, right? Like it's not sad. We both did well. It just didn't work out, right? It's just business.
Right.
And I think like the idea that it doesn't have to work out for 10 years, right? It can work out for 2 years and you can still have a great relationship. Andrew and I have a good relationship, right?
Mhm.
Like, and it's like, find the value where you can take it, right? Be grateful to the people that help you get where you are, right? And don't discount that value, even if it didn't go perfectly, and it will never go perfectly, right? So good lessons.
Prior to the accelerated program, did you have any like verbal customers that had like expressed interest in what you're going to build, or did you find those during or after the accelerator?
I was running a very similar business prior to the
Okay.
accelerator program. So my early customer validation was, hey, I would want to use a business like this, right?
Okay.
I would have used a product like this as a business owner in my previous business, right?
Okay. And did you need other conversations other than your personal desire to make that business a reality?
Not really. No, it's like I thought I had a good idea, and then I went to pitch it to accelerators. A bunch of smart people that, smarter than me, also thought it was a good idea. And I was like, all right, that's enough for me, right? They think it's good. They are bought in, right? I think it's good enough. I'm not an idiot. I'm bought in. And it's like, how much more proof do I need before I
Mm.
start working on something that I think is valuable, right? It's like, why don't I just do the work? And then if the market will communicate to me very, very clearly if what I'm building is not creating value, right? Because nobody's going to buy it. And then it's back to square one.
How'd you know that you want to go down the route of an accelerator versus being independent?
I didn't see a path to being independent.
Okay.
So I knew as a fintech platform, like from when the way we built the business model from the very beginning, it was we understood that the business didn't make money until it got to a certain level of scale,
Right.
right? And we were thinking millions of dollars of deal flow every month. And it was just like there was no way. I was like, all right, how do I pay for 2 years of growth of a business, right? Before I ever start making revenue from the business, there's no way to do it without
Gotcha.
outside capital investment. My network, I'm very grateful. My parents and my co-founders' parents, supported us for 10% of our initial seed round came from friends and family. So I'm very lucky for that. But, it wasn't the kind of like network where some people can go and they know a VC and they write them a $5 million check day one, right? So it was like I had nobody that I could raise money from,
Mm.
and the accelerator gave me a path to get the financing I needed to even validate whether I had a business or not, right? To validate product market fit and early traction.
How many conversations with potential investors did you have to have until you were able to get the requisite funding that you wanted?
So there's a funny story where out of demo day out of Boulder, Colorado, Boomtown demo day, I believe we were the only or one of like two companies to get a term sheet out of demo day. So it
Nice.
was like we did the demo day, we got a term sheet within a week, right? And then we went into negotiation, and the term sheet was juicy. It was for $500,000, right? After I'd been building this business from zero for 90 days, one accelerator program. And it was like, oh my God, nobody's ever offered me this much money for anything before in my whole life, right? And it was uh, tantalizing.
Mm.
The problem was that they required two board seats, right?
Okay.
So they were looking for 2 out of 3 board seats on the very, very first
Yeah.
round that we were doing. And it was like, there's no way. I'm not going to give up control of my company when it's 4 months old before I've had any opportunity, right, to evaluate to evaluate what the opportunity is, right? So I talked with my co-founder and we said, look, there's like a line in the sand on the valuation we would accept, right? And if they made the deal attractive enough, we likely would have taken it. But we just couldn't get to agreement. And one of the keys of being able to negotiate is being willing to walk away
Right.
from the table, right? And so we said prior to meeting, and I think was a good thing we did. We met the two of us and we said, what is our line in the sand, right? You and me, let's agree
Mhm.
before we go meet with those guys because they're going to try and change our minds, right? So then we had that meeting beforehand. We agreed. We put a line in the sand. We couldn't get there, right? And we said, if we don't get there, we're walking away. We couldn't get there. We walked away from the deal. That was one of the hardest decisions to make. And it felt like it was extremely risky. And
Mm.
everybody told me it was the wrong decision, right? Every single person other than my current co-founder, Eric Straub, who joined in January of 2015. So he joined after we got out of the accelerator. He was really the only one that said, we could do this ourselves. Let's
Mm.
just go the angel route. It doesn't matter, right? And so, but everyone else, even the accelerator, they were like, take the money. Like, how do you know you're going to be able to raise $500,000 in a month from now? You don't know. The
Mm.
money's on the table. Take the money, right? It's like, and it's really good advice for nine times out of 10. It's great advice, right? But I took the risk, again, not super risk adverse, and I said, no, I think I could do better. So we raised a convertible note instead. I
Mm.
was fortunate, like I said, my parents and my co-founders' parents put in the first 10%, and even getting that first 10% really opened up other doors, right? And so we were able to say, hey, we are partially committed. We have cash in the bank. It took us 10 and a half months to close, just over $500,000. So I was pretty much fundraising nonstop for all of 2015 to close that first $500,000. And then, fundraising after that was kind of like, it gets easier and easier and easier, right? Like investors know investors. As
Mhm.
long as you continue to perform, you do your job as CEO, and you're getting, good learnings or growth or whatever it is, right? You're just demonstrating progress. And you're doing a good job, I think it does get easier if you do a good job. So
And all the while you're fundraising, you had your team building out the platform. Is that right?
yeah, everybody's doing everything, right? So it's like Eric was running sales and marketing. So he was pretty much one man army on all things deal flow, right? I was doing like legal because I have a because I can do critical reading pretty well, right? So I was like writing our contracts and just hoping that they were good enough because we couldn't afford a lawyer. And then we had our other co-founder was doing 100% of the code, technology, tools, back end, right? That was a one-man team there. So yeah, it was like three guys doing their best for 9 months, and then we were finally able to start to like hire up a little bit and make some moves.
Can you tell me about your story about how you got your first paying customer?
Yeah, Reddit as well.
Hmm.
It's always Reddit. So there was this like big thing on guerrilla marketing back in the day, right? Where it was like, what do you do if you don't have a marketing budget and you can't spend any money on marketing, right? Guerrilla marketing is a really great way of doing it. So I have been a Redditor for a long time. It's like a group and a community that I know. And one of the great things that they say on the internet that's very true is if you want the right answer on the internet, don't ask a question,
Do
but
the wrong thing.
say the wrong
Yeah,
answer,
yeah.
right? Like that's the best way to get the internet to respond. And so it's like in the early days, we would have like so it was just selling, right? So to find the business that we wanted to fund, we just called up Kickstarter companies that were successful, like
Mm.
had successful campaigns, and we were like, hey, do you want more funding? Because we have another alternative inventory funding solution. You did Kickstarter, we would love to see if we can support you at Kickfurther, right? So we just called down through the list, like just cold calling, right? And then we got the deal. We put the company on the website, and then I went to Reddit, um, and I was like, I would like have a. So this is you're not supposed to do this, okay? So like between you, me, and your audience, this is like guerrilla marketing on Reddit. So I would create an account, right? And it would be an account that I would post a kick further deal, right? And I would say, hey, this has anyone heard of this company before? I'm not sure if they're legit, and you would like ask a question kind of like that, or you'd do a few different of those things, and like usually it would fail, right? Like
Mm.
no response, and then it just like gets buried, but every once in a while someone would see it, and it would be in the hot channel for a little bit on any given channel, and it's like we got our first 50, 100 users that way, and then
Nice.
from there we had a user referral program, which was you get $10, your buddy gets $10 if you refer a user, and the platform grew from there.
Hmm. That's a unique story. I haven't heard of Reddit marketing as a way to get your first initial customers before.
It was just like like I said, we did what we could with what we had, right? And it was like if I was a big Facebook or Instagram person, I probably would have been on Facebook or Instagram,
Yeah.
right? But what I knew was Reddit. That's where I spent a lot of my time, so it was something that I felt comfortable with.
So outside of Reddit and outside of referrals, what are your next channels that you built out once you were further down the life of your company?
It took us a long time. In fact, even today, we don't really, for users, we
Hmm.
don't really have much in the terms of user acquisition other than our referral program, and then some incentives for businesses to promote their deals to their community. So we did flesh out a lot of other acquisition channels for business acquisition, right? Which is actually where our bottleneck for growth typically is finding good qualified businesses to fund on the platform. Um, so, we had pretty much a cold call strategy for 18 months or a year, or like maybe 18 months to 2 years. We were pretty much on a cold call strategy. That started to taper off in terms of effectiveness, right? Like we just saw efficiency going down, costs up, outcomes down,
Yeah.
right? And it was just like it's more and more management bloat in between, right? When it's like cold calling. And
Hmm.
so we were like, look, what we need to do is establish really strong top of funnel kind of initiatives. And it wasn't really until 2019 that I would say we started to get our customer acquisition unit economics dialed in, right? And that takes a long time. And the reason for that is because it's super expensive. When you invest in marketing, it's like you have to be prepared to spend $50,000 and potentially not get outcomes from it, right? Like that's a scary pill to swallow when you're running a cash constrained business the way I was. So, we did the best we could. And then once we got to enough proof through referrals and, these various other channels that we kind of built out when we could, we were finally able to invest in real marketing programs in 2019. And then that's like, honestly, it was when we got those unit economics dialed in that the business started to take off.
So how many times over have you grown in terms of either like revenue, deal flow, or users in the past, I guess, 2 years?
So from 2018, let me think about this. So 2018, um, we did about $9 million of deal flow. This year, 2021, we should be on track to do roughly 44 million. So
Okay.
it's like it's our growth rate's accelerating. So we grew 30%, then 70%. This year we should be on track to grow 100%, and I hope to push and accelerate that to about 120% growth rate next year. We'll see.
What do you define as your end game for your company? Like, what's your ultimate mission?
So I think our goal is to be where inventory gets funded, right? So inventory is this like really critical core part of the human experience. Like, people like stuff, and that's always going to be true. That's my belief, is that people are always going to like stuff.
Hmm.
And that stuff is always going to need to be funded forever. And there's no one solution right now. How do you fund stuff, right? It's like some people have bank loans, some people go angel capital, VC, AR factoring, revenue advance, blah, 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 right? But there's no like, hey, that's where you go, right? Like Amazon's where you go to sell stuff on the internet. You know what I mean? Like not quite perfectly that
Right.
way, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like we want to be 51% market share of where stuff gets funded, where inventory gets funded. If I can get to 51% market share of that, I will have achieved my mission at Kickfurther.
Was there an experience, I guess, earlier before you even founded the company or before you founded the previous company that you knew you wanted to go down this path of consumer goods and making funding available for consumer goods? Like, why specifically this space? Why are you like, particularly passionate about this space?
So my parents are also entrepreneurs. They ran a supply chain management company. So they were helping people, essentially outsource their manufacturing to improve margins. Okay. And uh, so that's my background. I
Gotcha.
always knew supply chain, right? And it was one of those things that we kind of knew for a long time, that supply chain finance is an issue, right? It wasn't something that was everybody would ask it. All of our clients would say, "Hey, who do you get finance from?" And it's like, "Oh, we don't know. Talk to your bank." There was never a good solution. And it wasn't until I encountered the issue myself, because I started my own little merchandising company, um, that it was really like I was like, wow, this is really like it's pervasive. Every single product business has the same problem. Like, how has nobody figured it out, right? It seemed crazy to me. So yeah, I guess I just took a crack at it, right? It seemed like a really big problem, and I thought that maybe I had a solution, and it's working out until now. Like
Do you still sell merch on the side, or have you fully like focused on Kickfurther as the fintech platform?
I fully divested from the other business. So actually, I handed it off to my sister. She ran it very successfully for 3 years after I left.
One of the things I always like to discover about the e-commerce space, like I feel like there's heavy competition, and I want to learn more about, I guess, what helps your customers differentiate themselves. And I guess um, maybe that's a question for another podcast if you are not up for the question.
No, I think it's a great question, and what I would say is that our customers seem. It's like the way it feels to me. Okay, is that the world is moving to like niche marketing, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like it feels like our most successful brands have identified like a group of people or a community that's not being like really properly served. Even if whether it's branding or whether it's just like positioning or price or whatever it is, that they found some group that has a need that isn't being served by some other product, right? And it doesn't have to be big. That's what's
Hmm.
amazing, is that you can find like, if they're like 100,000 people, which is a tiny share of America, that's a massive customer base, right? And you can build a multi-million dollar business off of
Right.
that, right? And so it's like you find these people, they're serving like some really, really specific needs. It's like we had one company that crushed it, and they were doing, like their initial success was doing butt wipes for dudes, because like most butt wipes and wipes were marketed more for like families and for women, I guess. And they were like, you know what, guys like this too, so we're gonna make some manly butt wipes, and they crushed it. And it's like
Hmm.
and it's like things like that people don't think of. You just, if you can find and connect with your customers in a way that other brands aren't, and it's like maybe it's a simplification, right? But that's the reality. That's the way it seems to me. Is that unique insight into a customer base and serving them in a way that other companies aren't, and then being able to charge for it, right? You need to every single successful every single successful business, like 99%, right, is charging double margins. So you have to take your cost, you double it for wholesale, you double it again for the customer price, right? Which means you need like a 75% direct to consumer margin. That's kind of the number that I always toss around. And it's like, that's one of the things. If your customers won't accept that as a margin, right? Like they think the product is priced too high, then I would argue you're not solving a painful enough need, right? That you need to do better. Because that's the kind of margin you need for hyperscale, is what I would say.
Hmm. How did you come across those like numbers? Like, how did you learn that was the appropriate number?
Oh, the double's easy because so for hyperscale, this isn't always like, look, again, there's every single thing that I'm saying here, there's exceptions to these rules,
For
right?
sure.
So hyperscale, typically what we see is that businesses go direct to consumer, they get some traction, but it's lower volume. Then they open up a wholesale channel, Target, CVS, anything like that, right? They get massive volume, but low margins on that, right? And then they leverage that massive volume to then go negotiate with their manufacturer to reduce their cost, right? And then they can get to that double. And the
I see.
reason the double translates so well is because those major retailers that have the ability to drive huge volume for your business, they almost invariably will ask for a 50% margin. So if they buy something from you for $1, they want to be able to sell it to a consumer for two. And they want to see evidence that consumers will buy your product for two, right? If you're going to sell it to them for one. And if you're selling it to them for one, you got to make some money in that too, right? And there's chargebacks and there's
Yeah.
shipping and there's all of these things that when you deal with these bigger vendors, if you're on a 30% margin, you might lose money on those deals,
I
right?
see.
Like that's what's so crazy. You
Huh.
have like these vendors, they just push back everything. They push everything down into the small product business. So a 30% margin can evaporate once all of your fees and everything else get taken into account. So it's like you target a 50% margin. You'll probably end up keeping like 20% on that, right? But that'll give you enough that you can then continue use that money to grow your direct to consumer channel, improve your margins. And that's why I always advocate for the double because that's the kind of margins that give you enough to grow and also enough space to make some mistakes, which will
Hmm.
happen, right? It gives you a little bit of a margin cushion where if you get some chargebacks, you get some this or that or the other, it's not going to put your business underwater, right?
Are there some lessons you've learned from, I guess, observing all the users on your platform in terms of their stories and trying to bring consumer products to their audience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. We're actually working on this app we have called Snowmelt. So we're deploying a free mobile app. It's going to be coming out soon. We're like going into beta with it now, which is essentially just helping product businesses to get their quality control and their product specs up to date, like at
Hmm.
the beginning. So I would say the number one pain point I've seen with the entrepreneurs we work with is that so the profile is nobody solves problems until they have to solve it. Okay, that's like it's like well, I'm not going to deal with that until I have to, right? Because I'm solving a million problems, right? And so what a lot of these guys do is they'll say, all right, I want to buy this T-shirt, right? And they'll find a manufacturer through Alibaba. They'll get a quote. The manufacturer sends them a sample, and they're like, yeah, this sample feels great. Awesome. I'm going to buy 1,000 units, right? They buy 1,000 units, they start selling them. Great. What happens when that supplier starts sending you garbage, right? Like starts sending you low quality t-shirts. A
Hmm.
lot of these entrepreneurs don't know what they're buying. And it sounds crazy, right? Because it's like, oh, they're buying a t-shirt, but it's like, what's the weight of cotton? How is the
Yeah.
stitching done? What was the method of printing on the t-shirt, right? Like the manufacturing around something as simple as a printed t-shirt is complex. And if you don't know, right, we see entrepreneurs, they try to switch their supplier and they end up with a totally different product. And they're like, this isn't what I was expecting at all, right? But what I asked for was the same thing. I asked for a t-shirt and I got a completely different thing, right? And it's like, yeah, because you didn't spec it out, right? And if you spec your things out at the very beginning, right, with the first manufacturer, then what you have is you've got a sheet that you can then go, right, and you can get any manufacturer to quote on your specific product. And that's the work. It's like, it's important, not urgent work, right? And so the entrepreneurs we work with often don't get it done because, they live in the world of urgency. So we're developing an app that's, we hope will help them just get ahead of this, right? Because the best time to solve this problem is when you have a good relationship with your current manufacturer. You can say, hey, I don't know the answers to these questions. Can you please fill in your style of stitching and the weight of the cotton and your method of screen printing, just so that I have it for my records? That's the kind of thing where if you can ask for that while you're still placing orders, while the relationship is good, they'll be happy to provide it. If you wait until you have a problem, it's going to be tough to extract that information.
How'd you know that the app was a solution you wanted to build versus, say, like a blog or like an info product or a course or a book?
Good question, because so my background is in supply chain management. So then we used to create these product spec sheets for our clients. It was like a core part of our process. We won't run a supply chain if we don't get to a product spec sheet. And so it was the first thing we would always do when I was running supply chains. And the method of doing it is like, it's like involves all this stuff, right? Like you take a picture of the sample, right? And then you measure it, right? And you display the measurement, right? Like you can imagine the way these drawings would look. And what we realized is that with how comprehensive a smartphone is now, you can literally do the whole thing in a guided experience through a mobile app, right? It's like, hey, take a picture of the front of your product. Great. Our AR measuring tool thinks that this is 10 inches long. Please input the actual length. You know what I mean? It's super cool stuff that you can do now. So yeah, we wrote about product spec sheets and why they're important, and nobody did it, right? So it's like now with the app, we can provide the guidance, and then for Kickfurther, there's the further benefit that we can start to then aggregate this information and say, hey, this supplier, right? We see that 100 businesses are working with this supplier, and they're having issues, right? And we can start to aggregate supplier level data, and we hope to expose that long term as like because nobody really is interested in that, right? Alibaba doesn't want you to know which suppliers are like great because, right, they just want you to place orders and they get paid.
Right.
And so it's like that Yelp problem of like, who's the source of truth here, right? And who's incentivized to actually provide a source of truth? We want our people to work with good manufacturers that are going to deliver on time. So that's another opportunity that a mobile app provides that just a PDF or a blog post does not.
So, as far as I understand it, there's a platform where people can go for funding. There's an app that helps them negotiate and discover better or define better spec terms. Other things in your roadmap are, I guess, parallel and I guess in synergy with each other that you have for the foreseeable future.
So I would say those are the two that I'm most excited about. Another thing that we're working on as part of our product, because our main issue is that people just don't know about our solution, right? There's 500,000 product entrepreneurs in America. We're working with like 250 of them, right? So one of the things I'm excited about is we are exposing a lot of our APIs in a white label product so that we can have inventory funding powered by Kickfurther, provided by any number of financial partners like credit unions, community banks, stuff like that. So that is something I'm pretty excited by as well. Yeah.
In terms of like the minimum size of a customer, like is there a certain threshold where below a certain amount you just don't think it's worth engaging with them? Like if someone wanted to borrow like I don't know $5,000, would they come to your platform or would you I guess refer them to something else?
So we do refer businesses out, right? It's always worth our time to talk to businesses, right? And I think it's always worth businesses' time to talk to us. We're very friendly. Come have a chat. But yeah, so we typically we don't usually do deals that are less than $12,000 of inventory funding. That's kind of like the point where it starts to make sense. And then we have some partners that come in a little bit early. So if you're looking for $5,000, I always drop Kiva Zip. It's like Kiva Zip is a solution you should look for. It's interest free. You have to do a little bit of work on it, but if that's the level of support you're looking for, I think that's probably the best solution right now. Or traditional rewards crowdfunding, right? Like just go get some customers, go sell some pre-orders. That's a great revenue
Right.
funded is great, you know? Like that's a great way to get started too.
Would you happen to know how that partner or that affiliate would know, or how would they make money off of 0% interest?
Kiva Zip?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. So Kiva ran that program. They used to run like they became famous for like micro lending. You might know, like remember, it's like, oh, you buy a goat for somebody and then they like pay your goat back like over time kind of thing. Um, so they brought that to the US with this thing called Kiva Zip. I'm not really sure what their revenue model
Okay.
is. Maybe it's a transaction fee or a success fee or something. I don't really know.
I figured I'd just throw the question out there since it's on top of my head.
No.
So how do you? So you have the ideas in your head as it relates to your product roadmap. Do you have heads of product within your team that also help you do the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you choose to prioritize?
Yeah, so my co-founder Eric Straub is now head of product. So he's been involved in the business from the very beginning, has seen everything, right? And so it's like that's the perfect role for him. Um, we collaborate very frequently, and we prioritize, kind of like it's like that urgent, important matrix, right? So it's like, hey, this is urgent. Urgent stuff sometimes just needs to get done, and it chews up your resources, right? Because it's urgent.
Hmm.
And then we go through all of the important stuff, and we actually run an impact analysis, right? So there's like the classic effort v impact analysis, where you say, all right, this project is gonna be tough, but it yields big dividends, so let's invest the resources there. This thing is going to be really tough and it's not going to give us very much, right? Or it's going to have very uncertain outcomes. We don't know what it's going to give us, right? Let's deprioritize that. And, it's a push and pull between you've got sales, operations, your various departments, admin that all want resources. They all want to move their own, pieces forward. And it's like I always say, startups live and die on allocation of resources, right? Prioritization of resources. So I think it's some of the most important work we do is to say, hey, what are we going to work on? Where are we putting our resources, our time, and our energy? And the only way I think that you can do it reliably is if you bring in your key stakeholders, right? And you have enough voices in the room to try and get as close to the truth as you can get.
So you mentioned the matrix of importance and urgency, and I think that matrix looks a little different for different entrepreneurs at different stages of their company. So I think in the beginning, imagine most entrepreneurs try to optimize for like maybe no further than like 2 weeks down the line, just because you really can't see past the 2 week mark. How far into the future are you considering that matrix for you and your company now?
Oh, I've never gotten that question, but it's something I think about all the time. So yeah, you're exactly
Okay.
right. In the early days, it's like, what do we do next week, right? Like, how do I get the next customer? How do I get this deal funded? And it's like literally the thing that's immediately on your plate is what you're dealing with. As the organization has scaled up, we've been fortunate to bring in some like really smart, amazing people that are, happy to work and continue to build the opportunity with us. And so that gives me the opportunity to kind of pull myself out a little bit, right? And look a little bit further down the line. So I would say like most of the leadership within my organization today is looking at like, um, are we good for this quarter? And if yes, am I good for next quarter? Right. So most of
Okay.
the leadership, I think, lives in the like 3 to 6 month paradigm. Right. And for me, I feel like because I have that incredible support, right, from those people that are like really making sure that that's handled, I'm able to look a little bit further out, right? So I'm trying to focus on, the 6 to 12 months and then the 12 months to the next 3 years of growth, right? So it's like, am I going to be able to, and that's kind of like as we try and push towards becoming more of a public company, right? Like I understand that to be a public company, we have to have pretty good annual guidance, right? So my goal is to get to predictive um, annual guidance. That's what I'm trying to get to. And it is tough, right? When you're used to looking at stuff that's like 2 weeks away and you're trying to say, what am I going to be doing in a year from now, right? It's a totally different ballgame.
And you mentioned having a lot of brilliance in your team that helps you support or supports your ability to look into the far into the future. How have you built this team, and how would you encourage others to build their teams? And I guess how do you find these people? Because everyone wants smart people on their teams.
I think Kickfurther, as if I'm allowed to put a feather in my own cap, has done a good job of building good corporate culture, right? So I don't think it's really a secret. So I would recommend people that are looking at culture. There's a great book called Five Dysfunctions of a Team, which is like a super short little parable, and it talks about how to avoid dysfunction, right? And it's like, that sounds dumb, but actually not doing bad things is a really good way of getting to do good things, right? It's super short. I would recommend all, people that think that they want to be managers of people. It's a great book to read. And then the other book that I recommend is Traction by Gino Wickman. It's like this book from the 80s, but it's just like a step by step, like, do these things. You know what I mean? And some of the stuff, it's like, it sounds super basic, but it's like accountability, right? If somebody doesn't agree to do something, it's not fair to hold them accountable for it, right? That sounds like super basic, but a lot of managers get that wrong. Um, and it's also like not being arrogant, right? So it's like, I'm not in the trenches of my business in the day to day, right? I'm not on many sales calls anymore, even though I'm on a few every now and then. And so it's like, it would be stupid of me to not be talking to the people that are talking to my customers every single day, right? Those people have to have a voice in the organization. Otherwise, we're missing out on some of the most valuable customer feedback and opportunities to improve and better serve our market, right? And so it's like, and that is so valuable, right? Because you can imagine how many organizations are there where you go in and you have no voice, right? And you're just like a cog in the machine. And it's like, do your job, and that's all I want from you, right? And so it's like, when people come to Kickfurther, I really believe that they find it empowering. And then those people that see the environment where they're like, wow, this is a place and this is an environment where I can make a difference, right? The right type of people, and you're going to work with enough, right? The right type of people are going to see that. They're going to feel the culture. They're going to go above and beyond, and they'll self-identify, right? The leaders within my organization self-identified by just going above and beyond and demonstrating that they could create tons of enterprise value above and beyond where what we hired them to do. And and then you just get people that are like super bought in. They carry your culture, right? And they know how it affected them, and so they're happy to continue to build that same culture for the people they bring in under. And I think that that's it. It's a very self-fulfilling prophecy.
So culture makes sense to me intuitively as a way to retain people, and I guess to encourage people to refer the peers or former peers of your current staff to hire onto the current team. But what about the initial batch? Like, how did you find the initial batch before people even knew what culture on the inside looked like? Because as an outsider, if you're a startup trying to hire people, you can write about like maybe a couple blog posts about various like cultural values, and that might get some people to get interested in. But how do you like really like make that initial push?
Yeah. So my background is in sales. So sales, right? Cold calling, like cold called recruits. Find who you want to work with, talk to them, right? And a lot of the early recruiting is tough. Just like my original co-founder, I had to sell him. He was like, "Who are you? And why should I spend any of my time or energy on what you want me to do?" Right? And you're gonna have to go through that, and you can't have an ego with it either, right? If you go into those conversations, you have an ego, like, "Oh, I'm such hot shit. You should do what I want because I'm so smart," right? You're gonna lose opportunities to work with really talented people, because really talented, really smart people are also skeptical, right? Because a lot of people want to work with them. A lot of people want their time, right? And so it's like, be prepared for them to push back, and don't have an ego about it, right? Everybody's trying to do the best and make the best decisions. So,
Do you have any specific tools or frames of thinking that you use to remember to stay grounded and humble? Because I think a lot of times it's a lot of founders spend a lot of time in their minds, and it can be like like I think your own mind is like the worst echo chamber. Um, what do you do to like address that?
I'm a big believer in meditation. So I have the Headspace app. I used to do meditation sessions with my team every morning. We would do like 15-minute meditations. That's fallen off. I would like to get back into it. It's a tough habit to keep into, but I think mindfulness is really valuable. And that's kind of like, I don't know how else to describe it other than that, of like thinking, thinking very consciously about why you are making the decisions you're making, right? And are you making decisions that are in service of your ego, or are you making decisions that are in service of your stakeholders and your employees and your customers, right? And I think a lot of leaders can find themselves, and it happens insidiously, right? You don't even know that the reason that you want to do something is because it's going to make you feel better. But then if you actually consciously think like, what is the outcome I want to get from the decision I'm about to make? And is what I'm about to say to this person going to get me to that outcome? Right? Like every word you say, it's tough and it takes a lot of conscious thought, right? It's willful decision making day in and day out about how you treat people around you, and how you would want to be treated. It's conscious decision making, is how I would describe it.
Cool. Well, I'm very grateful for this conversation. I love hearing every founder's perspective and their story, their leadership principles, and how they choose to run their companies. And just out of respect for your time, I like to end all of my calls the same way. What is the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you if that's something they would like to do?
So if your viewers would like to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can also email me at Sean at kickfurther.com, SEAN.